During that time, we hacked into a BlackBerry and put a mobile app on the BlackBerry, a field services app. And I got a phone call from a guy named Mike Lazarius who said, "What are you doing with my BlackBerry?" AT&T's backbone network on an AI platform called Ruby. Ruby actually signed the tickets. It's like, sincerely Ruby. But it saved us a real almost $1 billion in 1 year. I wish more people would build with security in mind and not bolt it on later on.
I'm Tino Mantella, and welcome to the 18th episode. I can't believe it's 18 already, Leading with Relevance. It's a podcast series featuring what I like to say is some of the most prominent leaders around the country, around the world. And they're people that are generally busting through the status quo in one way, shape, or form, impacting both companies, but also communities, family, really kind of the full circle of life. So my goal is to interview and highlight the personal and professional journeys and learn about each person's why, as Simon Sinek would say. And for listeners, hopefully there'll be some practical insights that you can apply to your pathway. I'm loving the opportunity to talk to leaders, and I'm always learning from this. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Robin Bienfait, and she has a number of things she's going on. So I just want to briefly talk about that. She serves as the CEO and founder of Elevate and executive advisory firm. She's also the founder and CEO of Atlanta Tech Park, as you can see in her background there. She's a partner with Tackless Ventures and a partner with Velar Ventures. And prior to all that, she's been Chief Enterprise Innovation Officer at Samsung, reporting directly to the CEO, where she launched Samsung Business Services. She was the Chief Information Officer at BlackBerry, and the SVP and Chief Compliance Officer at AT&T. She also sits on a number of boards, including Great West Life Co., NACD Atlanta, Global Aviation, Canada Life Insurance Company, Empower Retirement, Georgia Institute of Technologies, Applied Research, and she's an American Red Cross Tiffany Circle member. She's been named one of the most influential leaders in corporate governance by the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, and she holds 18 patents. Many are still in existence. She's also been named one of the top 100 CIOs in STEM. And at AT&T, she earned the AT&T Software Excellence Award for Project Ruby, and she was listed in the top 18 women to watch in 2018 by Inc. magazine. She received her Bachelor's of Engineering degree at University of Central Missouri and her Master's degree in Management at Georgia Tech. So, Robin, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tina, very much for having me here. I appreciate it.
You and I go way back to my tag days, so I've followed your many different career objectives and goals and impact over the years. So I guess I'd like to start out with all those patents and business accolades you've earned. Did you always know that this was the path that you were going to take, or did you kind of fall into it later in your career?
When I started my career with AT&T, I didn't know that patenting was kind of part of the process, but you learned really quick when you joined because my first role was with Bell Labs. And it was one of our goals that a number of us engineers, they used to have a word for it. It's you had to patent or patent or not. It was part of the goal set. You had to have a certain number of patents every year, or at least submitting something. So it was the first time I actually, was one of the goals of us, publish or perish, I think is what the words I was seeking.
Right.
If you're not patenting something or putting a patent. So one of the first things I did when I was, my first role was in semiconductor device line manufacturing. And they brought in a bunch of engineers to show us some of their latest patents within the first 2 weeks. And you're like, oh, I can write down all these things I've been thinking about and make a patent out of it. Okay. So I've been part of a lot of patents. I don't usually like putting my name on a patent unless I was the person who actually came up with the original idea. So I don't mind helping people with their current patent or patent process, or even thinking about what's patentable within their product or solution. So I now have 21 patents. I've
Oh,
patented another.
21.
Yeah, I've got another patent on a biometric identity device. Hopefully, that will be going into the school systems pretty soon and has a silent radio on it.
Oh, wow. So I didn't realize Bell Labs and AT&T at that time that that was such a criteria for people in the technology side that you really expected to drive innovation through patents.
Yeah,
Um,
AT&T had I want to say, a plethora of patents, and it was just notoriety. You know, you should be either working on a patent. We all had little notebooks that we carried around with us because, goodness gracious, you know, if we had an idea, it should be writing it down and putting the date on it in our little books. And then that way, if we ever had to go back in time and say, oh, okay, the first time I ever thought of this was back, 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago, it helped with the patenting process.
so I want to go way, way back to your beginning, saying that we're older, but going back
More
to
mature, right?
seven siblings and family of educators.
Yeah.
Talk about your kind of childhood and did that influence your uh, trajectory into innovation and pathway to patents and all the other things you've done?
So yeah, there's seven of us. We go by number. I'm the second child
Okay.
of seven. There's five girls and two boys, grown and raised in Valdosta, Georgia. My father was the baseball football coach at Lowndes County and had five girls first. The two boys kind of came later, but he was a mathematician. So he taught math and was head of the math department. So, of course, all of us girls, even my brothers, are all in math in some form or fashion, whether we're teachers or engineers. And I've got one brother that's a nurse practitioner. So, all of us have leveraged math to our benefit. Growing up being part of a large family and parents that are both in education, you don't make a lot of money. So, part of the process was we were always fixing something. And I loved fixing something, whether it was the lawnmower or my dad would purchase these little HUD homes and we would go repair and refurbish the little HUD homes during the summer. And he would hand me all the stuff for I was the electrician. I
Interesting.
don't think I would have done that with my own children at the age of 9 here. I turn the power off to the house. You've got to go replace all the outlets,
Yeah, I
that,
think
you
there's
know what?
laws about that now.
I think there are. But then it wasn't a big deal, so here you go figure it out. So it's like go figure out how to go change all the activities,
Yeah.
whether it be light switches or the little houses are worn out pretty much, so you had to replace a lot of capability.
So being that it's football season, you think your dad used a lot of math for his winning ways in football?
He was the offensive coach for a while. He's passed now. It's been I don't know how many years, about 9,
Okay.
and they named the baseball field after him.
Wow.
So it was kind of nice. He's won a lot of championships down there. But yeah, baseball and football were his passion. And, we helped with a lot of statistician, work on the sidelines for him, keeping the numbers and keeping the score.
Yeah, that's important. More getting more important every year in the sports world. Um, so moving along, you ended up landing, I guess, an early job. I'm sure it wasn't your first job if you had jobs in high school, but at AT&T, and T, and you did that for 20 years. How did you kind of go into that? Were you looking for a role like that when you were was it when you were at Georgia Tech?
So no, I started at Valdosta State, and I was in their 3-2 dual degree program where you did 3 years and then you transferred up to Tech and finished your 2 years. But I had done a couple of years at Valdosta State and then found myself in England and submitted myself to Cambridge. So I finished my undergrad engineering degree through Cambridge University over in
Oh,
England
okay.
and was in a lot of classes. And I'd show up, I'd be the only girl in the class. My name is Roberta, so the A falls off for some reason in the days when you had to write it on a piece of paper. So everybody would call me Robert. So my name was Robert George.
Oh.
And it was interesting. I'd get in class and they'd call for Robert George, and I'd raise my hand. And, and then they'd realize I was a girl. And then we all got a pop quiz. And interesting enough, I would be maybe the only one or two that would pass the pop quiz. So I got to stay in class. I never knew that for a long time until I got into, I think, my master's program, and somebody says, "Oh, I hate it that you're in my class." And I said, "Why?" "Well, we're going to get a pop quiz." I thought that was normal. But apparently they were just trying to see whether I really belonged in the class.
Yeah, they're testing you.
Yeah. But you know what? That my whole career has had moments of testing.
So how did you go from there to AT&T, and T, and then you've made quite a career
So,
out of that 20-year
yeah,
career?
I found myself at Cambridge University and then got transitioned over to Central Missouri State, finished my degree there. Um, and I had to write my own degree. So Central Missouri State didn't have an engineering degree in their program. So I wrote my own degree.
Wow.
School made me sign a piece of paper that if I couldn't get a job with this degree, that I wouldn't hold the school liable, which is quite interesting.
Yeah,
So I signed that, and interesting enough, I had three job offers. One was from AT&T there in Central Missouri or near Central Missouri. Was one of AT&T's manufacturing plants for semiconductor devices. So I joined one of the manufacturing plants for semiconductor device, and I was an oxidation diffusion engineer for silicon
interesting.
in a wafer fab. And in about with 2 years in, 18 months in, I think when a foreign country was having their government subsidize all of their chips, and we couldn't compete. The U.S. couldn't compete. So a lot of our wafer fabs here in the United States back then shut down.
Very interesting. And I'm sure because at AT&T, a lot of those companies during those days, and I guess even now, you probably had a variety of roles there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, AT&T laid everybody in the plant off at that
Oh,
time.
wow.
And then about 6 days after that, I got a phone call and they said, "You're not a chemical engineer." And I said, "Correct, I'm not a chemical engineer." Yeah, because I had written, I was everything but probably a chemical engineer, although I had done some chemical stuff in my training, undergrad training. And they said, "Would you be interested in software design in Atlanta?" And I said, "Yes." And so I took a job with AT&T out of Alpharetta, actually. It was part of Bell Labs, and it was the time when AT&T was divesting all of the baby bells apart.
Right.
I knew nothing about billing systems, but they asked me to come in and cut the billing systems into I don't know how many pieces. So each one of the baby bells got their part of the billing system. So I had all what they call the common master files at the time. And I asked them to bring a couple of bills in. I'd never seen a LEC bill, what they call a LEC bill, phone bill from company to company. And the guy on the phone asked me, "Do you want a small, medium, or large?" And I said, "Well, just bring me a small one and a medium one." And they came into our atrium, and you know how some of these buildings are with huge atrium.
Yeah.
The boxes of these two bills filled the whole atrium. They
Oh,
put
wow.
admin's tape around it and said, "These are Robin's two bills." And I thought to myself, why are we printing these bills? Was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah.
And second was, these are how long do we have to keep these? So, I got to learn a lot about AT&T's billing environment, but at the same time, having never worked in a network, you have to really understand AT&T's network to understand how we bill that network. So I got a very good understanding of how AT&T's network was configured and construed between the different bells, and then it actually had to separate the different billing systems apart from each other. Everybody had to have, of course, core master files, and then you had all the other subsidiaries around it. But I went from probably about every 18 months to a new job within the company. I ended my career at AT&T as what they call last man standing, uh,
Okay.
which is the unelected CEO. That's when Randall Stevens came in
Yeah.
with Whitaker to acquire AT&T, core AT&T.
So from AT&T, what was your next step?
Well, that kind of gets into the discussion around Ruby.
Yeah.
So one of my patents is after my Ruby ring. And kind
Oh,
of made a joke about it, rules you build yourself. And it was the first AI deployment in AT&T's backbone network. And it was back in 1999. So AI is not new to me. So when I deployed that, we actually impacted about 20,000 jobs um, across the company because of not only the automation, but the ongoing learning of the platform as well. During that time, we hacked into a BlackBerry and put a mobile app on the BlackBerry, a field services app. And I got a phone call from a guy named Mike Lazarius who said, "What are you doing with my BlackBerry?"
uh,
Yeah, I like Mike. Mike is he's and I'll tell you this story. Mike is unbelievably clever, and I had just ordered, I guess maybe one of their largest orders at that time, 35,000 Blackberries, and
oh,
deployed
wow.
to the field. And he says, I said, well, we hacked into it and put a mobile app on it because my field services team, actually, I need to be able to get in touch with them when they're out in the field. And I want them to see the ticket from the work activity in real time as opposed to
Okay.
having to drive back and forth. And then I can put them on a location map and know where they are. Um, he said, can you come up here? I didn't even know they were in Canada at the
Yeah.
time. So went up to Canada. So by doing all of that work and putting AT&T's backbone network on an AI platform called Ruby, Ruby actually signed the tickets. It's like, sincerely Ruby. But it saved us a real almost $1 billion in 1 year.
Wow.
And we really needed that because, it was the time when all the telcos were struggling a little bit financially, and it was a big win for us. It was impactful to the field teams, um, but we did it in a very graceful way. I don't think it made a lot of noise. A lot of people were close to retirement, so there was a lot of assistance in that space. But I flew to Canada to meet Mike, and he said, "Why did you do this?" And I said, "It was the only device that the radio actually would attach out in the field. I would drive around in different rural locations with a BlackBerry and some of the other competitive products." And I said, "Yours was the only one." I said, "So you got a pretty good radio engineer." And he kind of chuckled because he's the radio engineer.
Oh,
So he is a dynamic antenna that was operating on the BlackBerry at the time, which kept tuned to the nearest tower. So it was just a positive as far as BlackBerry was concerned. You could be anywhere in the world and have communications, even in very rural areas.
now did you work, did they recruit you to over to BlackBerry at some point, or were you more providing support in some way?
So no, he asked me. He said, "Could you come to work for us?" And I said, "Well, sure. Do you mind if I come sit first?" I went in and took a week off on vacation and went and sat in one of their network operations rooms and observed them for about a week, very quietly. And then I wrote Mike a letter telling him what I would do differently or what I would do if I were to join and what I would be interested in. And Mike called me back and said, "I would like you as my CIO. And when can you start?" And I told him, I said, I was transitioning because there's a rule of 272 that once you integrate with another Bell company, you have to sit separate for a year. So I had to sit in that unelected CEO role for a year until that transition occurred. And then I went to for Mike and Jim Bosley on midnight of 2020, 2007. Yeah, it was not even It's been a long time ago. Almost, what is that? Almost 20 years.
20, almost 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. I still work with Mike. Mike has a Quantum Valley's Idea Lab, and he's working on quantum antennas. So I'm on his board for quantum antennas.
Interesting. Yeah, he did a good job. And then, I mean, that was sort of the ending years of BlackBerry. What happened over there? I mean, they just didn't respond to the changing
So
dynamics.
BlackBerry is still in play, more
Okay.
of a software house than it is a hardware house.
Okay.
And like we all know, hardware over time becomes more of a commodity.
Yeah.
And I'll use an example. So, and it's a very simple one. So the telecom, BlackBerry sat behind the telco. Samsung sits beside the telco, and Apple sits in front of the telco. So by understanding that, so our customer in BlackBerry was the telecom, was your telco, was
Okay.
the AT&T and Verizon. So the person asking us to build certain things was the telecom company.
Okay.
The case, and I'll use Apple for an example, Apple designs what they want to design, and then the telco has to work with what they're willing to provide them. And when you're waiting and in a relationship like that, you have a lot of lagging activity, and we know how fast technology moves. So we had an opportunity to be acquired about 3 or 4 different times and missed those marks. We probably were a good engineering division for a lot of companies. But at the same time, we could have really gone and transitioned to be software on anybody's device. And a lot of people don't know I call it two men and a server story. We ran BlackBerry Messenger, a
Right.
very efficient way all over the world, and we really wanted to open it up to all devices. And the two men and a server, we know them as WhatsApp. Got,
Okay.
yeah, got acquired, and a lot of that was my part of my BBM team that went
Oh,
over.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the WhatsApp's still going strong for
Going
sure.
strong and not worried about making money. It's about having the client base, 300, 400 million subscribers on WhatsApp. It's
Yeah.
it's about the community. So there's different ways to value
Yeah.
technology.
So AT&T, BlackBerry, Samsung, many other things you're doing. And since this is Leading with Relevance podcast, need to talk a little bit about leadership. Are there some core principles that have remained constant for you throughout your career? How much have you changed in terms of your leadership style over
I,
this time?
you know, I and I've had this asked of me several times. I never really sought a job. The job kind of found me. And a lot of times it's working with people you trust and vice versa, having people that work with you that you trust. And that I think it's one of Stephen Covey's books, The Speed of Trust.
Hmm.
I really have leveraged that kind of enablement. It doesn't mean you always bring your entourage with you to every job. I grew up in AT&T and T and know hundreds of people, and I was very lucky that and blessed that when I left AT&T, Randall Stevens laid off about 10 to 11,000 of my best friends.
Yeah.
And I had called Mike on the phone and said, AT&T is releasing a lot of my Bell Labs buddies. And he says, so Robin, if any of them fit here, let's bring them on. So I think we hired almost 8,000
Oh, wow.
of my Bell Labs buddies. And that's how we built that ubiquitous wireless network that we really didn't talk about very much. So we had built a capability that actually wove all wireless networks together into one. And it was sort of an overlay. And that in itself allowed you to be with a BlackBerry anywhere in the world and not feel the transition or impact of you moving from whether it was for Verizon and AT&T here, and then now all of a sudden you're on the Orange network or you're on, uh, one of the networks in China or in Dubai.
So, you talk a lot in different places where you've spoke, and you're very active with that about innovation and oftentimes about security. How do you see those two areas evolving in the next 5 years?
So I take an active role in security. Didn't realize I was really playing into the security role. My buddy at AT&T was Ed Amoroso. He's one
Oh,
of the
yeah.
top technologists in the cybersecurity space. And my second role, because having to implement everything that Ed wanted to do as the technologist inside of AT&T, when I went to BlackBerry, I had the luck of doing all product security for BlackBerry. And then I had to hire a CISO, and I probably interviewed CISOs for about 18 months, looking
Wow.
for one that might be smarter than me. But you always want somebody who knows more than you
Yeah.
in that space. With NACD, I've gotten my cyber certification, so it's something that kind of buttons up all the cyber activities I've been involved in, and several of my patents are in the cyberspace. So I just have a love for it, I guess a knack for it. Um, I wish more people would build with security in mind and not bolted on later on. It makes it more difficult for the technologists in the future. And when I see where AI is going, I really think we'll be able to build products and services with cyber and security as part of the fabric of
Embedded
the
in.
embedded instead of bolted on.
Interesting. So you see a more of a positive direction for security being able to handle all the things coming down the pike in terms of
Yeah. And so I
intrusion.
was a partner on Valor Ventures for Fund One and Fund Two, also an LP. I transitioned a couple of years ago to a new fund. It's called Tactless VC. Tactless in Hebrew means to the point.
Okay.
And my team is over in Prague, the two GPs, and the rest of the folks are on ground in Tel Aviv. We have already invested in over, I think it's about 15 now, portfolio companies that look at the intersection of cyber, cloud, and AI. And these are folks that are building infrastructure plays that actually have the cyber capabilities and AI capabilities already built in.
Got it. So you said 21 patents now to your name,
Yeah.
and these are ones that, as you describe it, it's not something that you just put your name on. These are a lot of these are your patents. Are there one or two that you're most proud of? You mentioned a couple, but something that's still in existence today.
One of them is I I'm kind of lazy. I have a lazy element to me in that some of my teams had to sit on hold quite a bit between the carriers. So they'd sit on hold, this is years ago, for 45 minutes. And I'm like, this hold stuff is just killing my, you know, cycle time and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So I have a patent in signaling technology that actually is the one that says, queuing. It queues you up. Are you is this your phone number? Can I call you
Okay.
back? Give you 15 minutes. You'll not lose your place in line, kind of
Oh, okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one you can probably relate to. The others are more in the AI space
Yeah.
and at the switch level. So it's kind of explaining. And then my new patents are more biometric related, but security related.
So I always like to ask this question because I guess it's with my own background. Probably everybody, if they were honest, they'd say that you learn a lot when you don't quite meet the mark or you fail or a misstep. Can you share a time when you faced a failure or a setback and how it turned into a learning opportunity?
Yeah, I've had a couple, and you have one sort of. So there were times when I would be sitting um, at BlackBerry one time specifically. we had an opportunity to be acquired. And I just assumed that the rest of the leadership team was aware. And come to find out years later, the rest of the team was not aware. And, I wish there's sometimes that I would have spoken up a little bit louder or made my view heard a little bit louder. Not that not that maybe it would have changed the trajectory,
Right.
but it might have, it makes me ponder the thought that how many times are people sitting there and just not saying something when they really should. And there's a respectful way to do that. It's just more of just not assuming that the other people in the room are aware of something. And
Yeah.
sometimes, or oftentimes, um, our leaders in the business may not know something that's going on in another part of the business, but typically somebody that's in a CIO role or an IT role they see all facets of the business. And I think it's a big gap in leadership that CIO or the CISO or the CTO is really not sitting at the table because they sometimes are assuming, oh, the CEO and the COO or the CFO have talked about this.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you find out it's a gap. And then you sit back years later thinking to yourself, maybe I should have called them into a room and said, hey, did you know that this one is doing this? So, you sit there and say, okay, maybe I should speak up. And then when you do speak up and then you're not invited back, you're kind of like, maybe I should have kept my mouth quiet and wrote it down for somebody else. I don't know. But I just think you have to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't be afraid of being fired.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that has allowed me to take on the number of positions and roles I've been in, and leading AT&T's global network and helping AT&T through not only Katrina and all the hurricanes we used to do, but 9/11. Those are things that, those are experiences that you never want to experience again. But at the same time that you look back and you say, I was as prepared as I possibly could have been.
So, Emnovate, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, it means embrace innovation.
Okay. Talk
I,
about that.
I had I do my security products. So I have a software product that I'm getting ready to launch, and it's called Safety Box. It's quantum resilience for secured files. And my other package is digital awareness, which is the biometric ID badge, also for physical security and logical security access. So, as I work on that, it's Innovate being embrace innovation. I put an ad out at Georgia Tech for a smart cyber or security intern, and I had a gentleman. He says, I'm smart. I don't know anything about security, but I would love to work with you.
That's
And
funny.
he's super smart. I guess that's part of the reason why he was at Georgia Tech. He's now doing quantum stuff up at Bloomberg in New York. So he's super smart, and he learned all the security elements working with me. So it was quite fun. So innovate is a term he coined,
Oh,
and came in and he said, "Hey, Robin, I found a domain site. Embrace innovation. We'll call it Innovate, and it's $2.99 a month." I was like,
uh,
"Okay, sign me up."
that's interesting. Talk a little bit more. Now you've got me curiosity piqued here. Biometric ID badge, what does that mean?
So, physical access. So when I was at AT&T, I ran 6,000 locations globally and over 200 plus data centers, and I'd be flying somewhere. And each one of the physical access controls to each building was different. So I've built an ID badge that carries all the radios in it. You can flip the radio in it with a mobile app.
Okay.
But the biggest win on this is my ID badge is um, assigned to me.
Okay.
I can't hand it to the janitor. It keeps me compliant to physical access. And the way to think about it is when you wear an ID badge in an office, you're supposed to be able to see my face and a picture of my face on the badge. It lets everybody else know that I belong here because
Yeah.
they see me associated to the badge. They may not know who I am, but they know that I work here because I have my badge on me. But it also allows me to be very mindful of what I do with my badge because I'm now a fingerprint associated to it. And the radios on the badge can't be cloned because the moment my thumb is not present, the radios are hidden.
That sounds really interesting. So you've developed that and you'll be selling it to
So
business.
we're launching into two arenas. One is in, so we're brownfield or greenfield. So if
Yeah.
you're, you know, got an old building like the one I've got, it works here. If it's new, so you don't have to change out your physical equipment, your doors, your readers. You just changing out your ID badge, so it's multi-factor. So this gives
Okay.
you a multi-factor access badge.
Very interesting.
And so,
So,
yeah, it allows you to, it's kind of funny. I have Atlanta Tech Park. We have over 95 companies here in some stage of acceleration. And I came out one night, I had been on the phone with some of my Japanese partners, and a young lady had both doors held open, and her boss had handed his badge to her so that she could gain out of hours
yeah.
access. Yeah.
Okay. But that wouldn't work
This would
with
not
your
work
new one. Yeah.
with the new badge.
So you mentioned Atlanta Tech Park. You've got it in the background there. So talk a little bit about that. 90 plus startups. There's when I was at Tag, we in 2004 there were very few, and then by the time I left in 2016, I think there were over 100 different types of incubators, accelerators, depending on what you want to call it, depending on what they do. So talk about Tech Park.
So Innovate is my coaching arm.
Okay.
Tackless VC is my funding arm. And the physical location where the entrepreneurs can gather and or anybody else that wants to be member of a global innovation center. So we are a global innovation center that help companies at all stages. We primarily focus on those that are in acceleration. We have 95 companies that are resident here. And in addition to that, my portfolio companies they have access. And then we have a number of clients that are virtual engagement. So we represent about 17 countries, and we're trying to help companies land and expand in
Okay.
the United States and predominantly here in the state of Georgia. We're
How
very
long?
collaborative. To me, somebody says, "Oh, Robin, you're competing with Curiosity Lab and Tech Alpharetta." We're really not. There's
Yeah.
not enough support for the entrepreneurial base that we have in Atlanta. So we tend to collaborate with anybody. I mean, Tech Alpharetta and us and the Village, we're considered the park, and ATDC, we all are working together
Great.
as a collaborative initiative.
I wanted to make sure I talked to you a little bit, ask you some questions around women leadership and the challenges that maybe you faced or you see other women facing, and has it gotten better over the last decade?
You know, I was talking to somebody the other day. I was never somebody who went and was part of women of AT&T or women
Right.
of this or I always wanted to be part of the technologist group or in the
Got it.
tech arena. And sometimes I'd get a phone call saying, "Hey, Robin, we really like a woman in this role." And I was like, "Okay, I can give you a couple of names." I really want somebody to seek me out because I'm the talent they're looking for. And it was interesting when I went to work for Samsung, I had let my I had written my resignation letter for BlackBerry, and within about 3 minutes of posting it online, somebody from Samsung called me, and I met them up in New York, and they walked in the room with a big file, and I said, he said, "This is going to feel a little creepy," and I said, "Okay." He said, "But we've been tracking you for 9 years."
Oh, wow.
And I really believe that this is the future of talent. that we're going to start watching certain talent across the globe. And,
Interesting.
you know, you and I both, when we work with people we like to work with. And it's not, you're not looking for all like minds, but you want to collaborate with somebody who's going to challenge you and or make you better. And I really believe that we're going to start tracking talent and pursuing talent in a different way, because AI is going to push us in that direction.
So going back to startups a little bit, you've worked with so many technologists and entrepreneurs, and um, you have 95 companies now in Tech Park, and you probably get to observe a lot of them and the boards that you're on. What can you sort of identify early on who's going to be successful, or there's some consistent qualities that founders and startup teams have? I mean, you talked about they're all different and they might approach things differently, but do you see some commonalities?
I love founders that are coachable. And when I say that, that doesn't mean they do everything that you're suggesting. They take what is relevant to them and then they kind of test it and then they sort of deploy it and or back up and try it a different way. Um, what I kind of in my short years of coaching entrepreneurs, and it's interesting. I'm have a talk that I used to do, which was innovation has left the corporation.
Mm.
It's very hard for the corporations to innovate because it's disrupting their own product. They almost need to do it in a different facet. And a lot of times they need to be just married up to several innovation centers or tech villages or tech parks and just be around the entrepreneurs. Some of my most successful entrepreneurs are ones that pop out of middle management. One popped out here in 2018, and John built Rebus, which is a Steels Exchange, and he's I think my first unicorn that came out of the park. And now he's back here with two new companies. So when you see that, and entrepreneurs that are driven, they've been in the corporate space, they've been in business, they know they can't change that business, but there's a facet of the business that needs to be constructed, and they willing to take the risk and gutsy enough to step out and run it themselves. I think those are really strong traits of a successful entrepreneur, and they tend to be serial entrepreneurs.
So you also play a lot of roles in different boards, and I guess from a standpoint of and I've been involved a little bit with on board, women looking for their first board role. But I guess maybe what I want to ask you about is, what's good corporate governance? I mean, how do you approach boards, particularly in this tech-driven world?
So I think all boards are going to have some technologists sit on the board, and they need that technologist needs to have business acumen as well. And it's important that they're not just a technologist, that they can actually communicate between the technology people in the company and the business side of the company. But I'm an advocate for on board. I'm on the board of NACD, National Association of
Yeah.
Corporate Directors, and I'm on the board as the cyber guy. I know that sounds interesting, but a lot of new boards have to have a cyber technologist or an AI or a transformational technologist sitting on the board. Um, there is me and one other that sits on some of these boards. And I'd really think that a lot of boards, even though they tend to go for CEOs or CFOs or COOs, there's got to be a technology person in the mix. And so we've started a cohort as part of NACD for technologists, for those CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs, helping them also transition to board assignments because there's usually a gap in the communication between NOM and Gov. I was the chair on Nom and Gov for Mitsubishi Bank's board, and it's hard to get past, you've got to have that skills matrix for that individual, and they've got to be able to handle risk and sit on compliance, and they've got to be comfortable with, balance sheets and looking at financials, and they have to be interested in the business. I think that's a big part of it. Um, but there'll be more private board placement with the 95 companies that sit here. There's a lot of advisory board placement opportunities
Right.
and some board placement opportunities. So sometimes getting started in that space is not being up on a NASDAQ traded board, but getting in on some of the other board assignments, seeing if that's really something you like to do because it's sitting at the table in a different way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, get involved with something. It's good for the community too. So whether it's a corporate board or an advisory board, or even I'd add a nonprofit board, something where you can kind of get a sense of board, how it works, and contribute to it and enroll. And have you seen a movement on boards that you're familiar with that are starting to put tech people on them?
Um, I would love to say yes, but I'm not really seeing it in a big
Not yet.
way.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is they're going to have kind of, and I don't want to say a divided, that's not really it. A lot of the bigger boards need to have a true technology committee, not an ad hoc one or one that's quiet, that's kind of ghosting behind the scenes. They need to actually have a technology committee. And I think once they put a tech committee to the table, uh, like you have the risk committee and an audit committee, I think there needs to be that technology committee as well. And when you do that, you're going to have one or two other technologists at the table.
One last question I always like to ask, and remember it's around relevant leadership. And you can pose it for startups or whatever way you want to do it. But if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice regarding relevant leadership, what would it be?
I would say make sure that you've got a coach or somebody that you can talk with that is not part of your business, outside of your business, somebody that you respect their leadership style. And sometimes before you make a decision, take a couple of breaths and go have a conversation and then come back, mainly when it's a big decision. The entrepreneurs, they fail a lot. There's a lot of failure
Hmm.
in the entrepreneurial space, but it's not true failure. It's part of the learning process. They'll pivot 9 times before they succeed. That's an average. So they have to have tenacity. And they are sort of sitting out there alone. And that aloneness can actually cause a little bit of despair. And I think them having somebody in their corner that they don't have to pay, but the person that pays attention and engages and they can use this as a sounding board, I think it's critical.
Well,
So,
that
if you're not mentoring somebody today, there's a lot of mentoring opportunities.
right. Well, Robin, this has been great. Thank you for joining me on Leading with Relevance.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.